We are right on time in class, which is fairly unusual. It's our 5th lesson, believe it or not, and we have not fallen behind at all. And I don't anticipate falling behind this morning either. All right, so today we're going to talk about the Diadochi, which you may be looking up there at the screen, and you may be looking at your papers and saying, what in the world is that? Well, that is actually the term that we use when we talk about this period of history. It is a word that comes to English from the Latin, which comes from the Greek, which simply means successors. So then the logical question would be, well, why don't we just say the successors? And the answer to that would be, I have no idea. I just know that that's how it's referred to as a Diadochi this period. Hopefully, everyone kind of took my warning last Sunday, or last Wednesday night, I guess I should say, and had an extra coffee this morning. Maybe you've got some Tylenol with you in your purse. If you don't have, guys, if you don't have Tylenol, I bet your wife has some Tylenol somewhere in her purse or something like that, maybe ibuprofen. You might need it today because this is one of those classes that is very complicated because it is a period of history that is very complicated. As a matter of fact, when I try to prepare material for this, and when I prepared this material, it's like, how do I take what is an insanely complicated period of history and somehow make that understandable to people that are not PhDs in that period of history? Well, the good thing is I have to do that for myself because it's such a complicated time in the intertestamental period. But it is a time that's really important for us to at least have an overview of because it lays the foundation for a lot of things that are going to follow in the next classes that we have as we cover the history part of the period. So let's go ahead and just remind ourselves. We talked Wednesday night about Alexander the Great. That is a map representing his empire. Remember that Alexander the Great's empire at this point in time, when he dies, is the largest empire ever in this part of the world. Okay? It covers more territory and more people than any empire up until that time. And remember, he does this in about 10 years, and he's very young when he does it. How many battles did Alexander the Great lose? None. He was undefeated militarily, never lost a battle. He builds this empire, and then just when you think it can't get any better, right? He dies. Unexpectedly, without making any plans for then what is going to follow. Again, just by way of reminding, he builds the largest empire. I already said that. Sometimes I talk before my points. He dies in 323 BC in Babylon. He leaves no clear successor. He hasn't left any kind of a will where he says, this is who I want to rule my empire after my death. He doesn't have any plans for this because he wasn't expecting to die, okay? That's the kind of man he was, all right? Probably a lot of us can appreciate that. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I would suspect that if I asked for a show of hands, there'd be some of us in the room this morning that have never prepared a will to decide what's going to happen with your property after you die. I'll say this, if you got minor children and you don't have a will, mob Austin today at the end of class and talk to him about getting a will. Because dying without a will makes all sorts of problems, especially if you got little kids at home. Alexander dies without a will, and it causes all sorts of problems for the empire. So, the generals, who are the representatives of the Macedonian nation, okay? His generals are all Macedonian, even if some of his troops are now from the peoples he's conquered. His generals are all Macedonian, so they meet together so that we can decide what are we going to do because we've got this huge empire, and clearly if there's no one running it, what are people going to start to do? They're going to start to rebel. There's going to be unrest. So we're going to have to get a hold of this and figure out how we're going to run this empire. So there are some potential successors that are put forward. In fact, it kind of boils down to 4. One of these is a fellow whose name is Aridaeus. Aridaeus was Alexander's brother, so he was at least Macedonian. However, he was illegitimate, so he's a brother but illegitimate. He was epileptic, and he was considered mentally unfit. So now you've got an empire that's been conquered by a guy who was a genius. One option is to leave it in the control of someone who is not mentally fit to lead, Aridaeus. A second option is, well, we can leave it to Heracles to run. The problem with that is Heracles is only 3 years old, but he is at least Alexander's son. The mother was a former concubine, and so Heracles was not of full Macedonian blood, but he is definitely an option on the table. The third possibility is Alexander's yet unborn child by Roxana. Roxana was a Bactrian princess who was married to Alexander and was pregnant with a child. The problem with that is, pre-ultrasounds, you don't know boy or girl. You don't even know if the baby's going to be born. You don't even know if the baby's born, whether the baby's going to survive, because infant mortality was pretty severe in the ancient world. But that's a possibility. We'll throw that on the table as well. The other possibility is that we can do collective leadership. We generals are going to get together and form a group that's going to make decisions for the empire. Now, without saying how things work out, generals are, by definition, what kind of males? Alpha males. So you get a collection of alpha males together who say they're going to rule collectively. How do you think that's going to work? Not going to work, okay? But if you're one of those generals, you're thinking this is a really good possibility because, after all, we fought to make this empire. We want to keep it together, and so that's certainly a possibility on the table. So what ends up happening? What ends up happening is they have the Babylonian settlement. That's really what it's called, okay? I did not make that up. The Babylonian settlement, General Perdiccas, okay? I want you to make sure you remember all these names. There will be a test at the end of class, okay? General Perdiccas becomes regent, okay? Aridaeus then takes the name King Philip III. So remember, this guy's mentally unfit. He's epileptic. He's illegitimate, okay? But Perdiccas says, okay, I'm going to be, regent in all of this. Roxana gives birth to a son. He gets the name King Alexander IV. So we got King Philip III, we got King Alexander IV. Remember the names, okay? Other generals then become satraps. You got Perdiccas that's ruling in the place of an unfit and ruling in the place of now a child that's been born, okay? Other generals become satraps, which simply means that they're going to be governors over various areas. What's going to follow is a series of wars that's going to rend Alexander's empire apart. It's a nice, big, pretty picture in that map. By the time all is said and done, thousands of people will be dead, and that empire is going to be torn to shreds as these generals end up fighting over the various parts, the scraps, if you will, of the empire. So I'm moving my notes forward. Let's go ahead and continue on. So what follows is what's called the First Diadoc War. Okay? Those of you who are visiting with us this morning, I just want to say this. If you're wondering, are you in a Bible class? You really are in a Bible class. We're covering the intertestamental period, which means we got to cover a lot of history. So if you're thinking, wow, I didn't know I went, into a high school class this morning, we really are a Bible class. But this morning there just won't be very much Bible in the Bible class, okay? But if you come every Sunday for the next 2 months, you'll understand the method to the madness. Okay. So the First Diadoc War starts in 322. It lasts 2 years, goes to 320. The generals are afraid of, this is not a surprise, Perdiccas having too much power. Remember, alpha males, okay? He's got too much power, okay? We can't have that. So they're afraid of that. And in the process, then, Alexander's body gets stolen, okay? He's in Babylon. That's where he's buried. But somebody steals the body. The body was en route to the tomb at Egi. Remember, we saw that. Who's buried at Egi? Anybody remember? His father is, okay? So the body's being taken up there. It was in Babylon. We're going to take it up to Greece, to Macedonia, to bury it in Egi in the family tomb. But on the way, it gets stolen. We get a fellow named Ptolemy. He convinces the convoy to bring the body for burial to Alexandria, Egypt. You don't want to go to Macedonia. Bring it down here to Egypt, and we'll bury it there. Then an alliance is formed against Perdiccas. It's Antipater, Craterus, Ptolemy, and Lysimachus. All right, are you writing these names down? They're on the test, okay? I guarantee you will not remember these names at the end of class. I won't remember these names one slide down the road, all right?
The body is stolen at what point?
Somewhere en route.
Did Ptolemy already say he wants to
It was en route no, it was en route to Egypt in Macedonia. It's down here in Babylon. It's en route to Egypt. Somewhere along that route is when it gets diverted to Alexandria. And it's going to stay in Alexandria, by the way, until the Roman period. All right? What's the deal with the body? I don't know, but they're wanting the body. I guess there's some prestige in having the body in your territory, okay? Which would make sense given Alexander's personality, and no one is going to come close to Alexander. None of these successors are even going to come close to Alexander in stature and in ability, okay? So we have this alliance that's formed. Perdiccas unsuccessfully invades Egypt and then is murdered in a conspiracy led by Seleucus. There we go, another name, all right? Some of these names are going to be important. We're going to see them later in history. So, a couple of photographs of statues. Remember I said that in this period we start to get lifelike statues because the Greeks are very interested in everything being very lifelike. So there we have Ptolemy, and there we have Lysimachus. Those are just a couple of statues that are out there of a couple of these fellows that are involved in all of this first Diadoc War. All right, so the war again lasts for 2 years. In 320 BC, we're going to have a settlement. After all, war's no fun. We're going to have to figure out some way to get past this. So they make a settlement. Ptolemy remains the satrap of Egypt. So he's going to rule in Egypt. Seleucus becomes the satrap of Babylonia. All right, these are both generals. Both of these men are generals. Lysimachus keeps Thrace, so that's way up north of Greece. It's in Europe, okay? He keeps Thrace. Antipater becomes the new regent for Philip Aridaeus and Alexander IV. So we've still got the unfit brother, and we've still got the son that is a baby at this point in time. They're going to relocate to Macedonia, and Antipater is going to make sure that he's kind of ruling in their place. So if you kind of visualize this, you got Ptolemy. Actually, you don't have to visualize it. I'm going to pull up a map, and we can just mark that point. It's the end of the United Empire, okay? So here's our map of the empire of Alexander. Let me just point out where all of these things are happening. So you've got Ptolemy is down here in Egypt. Seleucus is out here in Babylon, Babylonia. You've got, and I want to get this right because it's really hard to see that map. You've got Thrace and Macedonia are up here. So they're smaller areas and they're right next to each other. And Philip, or Alexander's brother, and Alexander's son are going to be up there in Macedonia. So they're in the heartland of the Macedonian Empire, if you will, whereas you've got these other generals that are ruling elsewhere. I'm not real sure what happens to the rest of this territory. It really is germane. It's not really important to what we're talking about in the class. Remember, there are some kingdoms out here in India, Greek-speaking kingdoms out in this area because of the empire that Alexander establishes. So that's the settlement of the First Diadoc War. Because it's called the First Diadoc War, that means there must have been a what? Second Diadoc War, and indeed there is. Peace lasts 2 years. Okay? The next war starts in 318. It goes to 315 BC. Antipater dies, and his son Cassander rebels. Cassander, Ptolemy, and Antigonus, there's some new names for us, all form an alliance. We're going to get together, okay? We're going to form an alliance. Ptolemy invades Syria and Phoenicia, and in December 317 BC, Philip Aridaeus is executed. Okay, so there's one potential successor. He's executed, all right? He's off the scene. I might just point out, because this is a Bible class and we're talking about the Jewish people in the intertestamental period, that when you see something like that, who's living in those areas besides Syrians and Phoenicians? Jews are, okay? If you imagine, and we will, because I'm going to go back to that map. If you imagine, and this is historically a problem for Israel. Israel is right here. If you're Egypt and you want to invade somebody, who do you invade? Usually that way, okay? Where do you have to march? Right through Israel, okay? The ancient land of Israel. If you're up here and you want to invade Egypt, everybody wants Egypt, okay? If you invade Egypt, where do you have to march? Right through Israel. Israel is in the marching area of everybody, either attacking north or attacking south. And that's a part of their history. We see that, for example, with, I want this to be a Bible class, Josiah. King Josiah. When does he die and why does he die? I don't want the year, okay? Because he's trying to stop Pharaoh Necho from Egypt from going up to Carchemish to engage in that battle that involves the Assyrians and the Babylonians. So he goes out to try to stop them marching through the pass. And the result of that is he dies, okay? So this area of Israel, these armies marching back and forth are very significant, okay? So back to our notes. Let me pull that back up. So we get this invasion in Syria, Phoenicia from Ptolemy, who's down in Egypt. December 317 BC, Philip Aridaeus is executed. All right, let's continue on. We're still in that first war. So Olympias, who is Alexander's mother, she's captured and killed in 316 BC. Okay? It was dangerous to be a member of Alexander's family. Those of you who were in the lecture last night, it was dangerous to be a member of Herod's family, okay? So it was dangerous to be in Alexander's family because a whole lot of his relatives are going to die. Olympias is captured, she's killed, 316. Antigonus is in Victor in Asia, and remember, this is Asia like the biblical Asia, not the continent out there to the east. Seleucus flees for protection to Egypt in 316 BC. All right, that ends the Second Diadoc War. Okay, there's no settlement, at least not one that we're going to talk about in class. Then we have the Third Diadoc War. Okay, it starts in 314, goes to 311. So how many years of peace between the two? One. All right, one. This is almost the second phase of the second war. Okay, but it's called the Third War. There's an alliance against Antigonus. That alliance is Ptolemy, Cassander, Lysimachus. Antigonus again invades, well, he doesn't do it again, but there's an invasion of Syria and Phoenicia. All right, so if you're the Jews living in that area, life's hard, isn't it? Because when an army marches through, what do they eat? They eat everything you got. They're not carrying MREs or C rations with them. They're living off the land. So if your field has just been harvested and you've got all this barley and all this wheat that you're going to feed your family with for the next year, these soldiers come through and they take it. Oh, and you got a nice looking sheep over there. I was kind of hoping for lamb for dinner, so there we go. Oh, you got a horse too. We always need horses in the army. So they're going to take it. So you've already had one army within the last couple of years march through. They've taken everything. You've begun to recover from that, and lo and behold, another army marches through, and they take everything again. Life is hard for people in those kind of territories. So Antigonus invades Syria, Phoenicia. Also, Tyre falls to his army. Antigonus, however, fails in his invasion of Europe. He's not able to do anything with Macedonia and Thrace, that area north of Greece proper. Seleucus, who has now become one of Ptolemy's generals, all right, he returns to his position of satrap of Babylon. Now, how many of y'all right now are wishing you had really gone to Starbucks and gotten another coffee? We're not even close to being done. I'm sorry? People are messy. This is a messy period, okay? We have to get through it. Bear with me because nothing else makes sense if we don't get through this. All right, so still talking about this Third Diadoc War. In December 311 BC, they made it. Peace treaty, that ends the war. The aftermath of this Third Diadoc War is that Alexander IV and Roxana are murdered secretly in 309 BC. Again, you don't want to be a part of Alexander's family when all these alpha male generals are vying for power because you are a threat. And so Alexander, who at this point in time is how old? Just give me a round number. I don't want an exact number. He's a child, okay? What we would call a child at any rate. Roxana is the boy's mother. They're murdered, 309. So there's not going to be any more Alexander IV on the scene, okay? Well, why does this take place? Because the treaty had stated that Alexander IV would be given the kingdom in 305 BC. But Cassandra was not willing to give up power. So you got a treaty that says Alexander is going to be the next king. That happens in 305. I don't want to give up that power, so what are we going to do? Kill him. And he's killed in 309 BC. And we'll get rid of Roxana at the same time because, why not? She's the boy's mother. She might cause problems. Just get rid of both of them. Okay? Third Diadoc War. Let's talk a little bit then about Antigonus and Seleucus. 311 BC, Seleucus, who remember is a general, he conquers Media and Elam. These are points to the east, okay? Way out there where Persia is. He conquers Media and Elam. And Antigonus attempts to defeat Seleucus in Babylonia. He attempts to do that. A peace treaty is then concluded probably in about 311 BC. And from that time, we can mark that year, from that time Antigonus is active in Western Asia, while Seleucus is active in Eastern Asia. So kind of picture the Bible lands. I want to see if I got a map. I don't. Not yet. Okay. So you got Persia, Babylon on one side, you've got Asia Minor on the other. Antigonus is in Western Asia, so he's the area north of Palestine. Seleucus is out there in Mesopotamia. That's where they're situated. By the way, who's in Egypt? Ptolemies are in Egypt, okay? So you've got three major powers that are in the region of Israel. And none of these guys like each other very much. What do you think's going to happen? You think the Third Diadoc War settles all of this? Not at all, okay? This was a terrible time to live in Syria, Palestine. It just was. Because war is going to go back and forth, okay? That's something that we as Americans really can't relate to because the last time this country was invaded was in 1812. And the end of that war was we won, okay? I think maybe the Japanese landed on one of the islands in the Aleutians in Alaska, but who counts that, right? The last time America proper was invaded was in 1812 in that war, okay? And so we don't have a concept of what this is like to have armies always marching across your soil. If you're in Israel in this period, that's what you're living with because you never know when these two generals that we have nothing to do with and cannot influence decide they're going to go to war again and march through our territory and steal all of our food and our animals and probably kill a bunch of men as well, which is not going to do well for the women who are left behind, the women and children who are left behind. All right, it's a very difficult period for the Jews. This is, again, a statue of Seleucus. I might point out that we're used to seeing Greek statues all marble, right? Would it surprise you to know they were all painted originally in color? Okay, most of that's worn off over time, but you can see it in this statue. You can see what's left of the whites of his eyes. Okay, that's kind of not what we're used to. We think they just made white statues. This particular one is, I don't know even what that's made out of to make it black like that, but there it is. All right, so, of course, we have a fourth Diadoc War. I hope y'all are all keeping this straight, okay? It starts in 307, so we get roughly 4 years of peace, lasts to 301. Antigonus's forces invade Greece because, after all, Greece is important. We want to have Greece. It's the heartland of our culture. Cassander is severely weakened in that invasion. Antigonus, however, now shifts his focus. He wants to fight Ptolemy, who is defeated in Cyprus. So now the people of Cyprus get to understand what war is. From 306 BC, Antigonus accepts the title of king. Okay? He's not been calling himself a king up till now. It's only been Philip Aridaeus and Alexander IV who have been kings. All these other guys are generals, satraps, governors. Antigonus says, I'm going to be king. So he appropriates that title to himself in 306. 306 as well, now that I'm the king, I need to go invade somewhere else. He attempts, but fails to conquer Ptolemy in Egypt. So Egypt is still able to maintain its independence. All right, share with y'all something else that we get in this period. We start to get coins that are also pretty realistic and also give us some inscriptions that are interesting. This is, from that standpoint, it's kind of a neat period. So this is the coin of Antigonus the First, Monophthalmus. Cyclops is what that means, okay? The inscription reads, of King Antigonus. So he is sitting there on the throne, and the inscription, that's his nickname. He's Cyclops, okay? Go on, ask me, how did he get that nickname? I am dying to tell you, I'm dying to give you the answer. How did he get that nickname? Probably. I don't know. My answer to that is I don't know how he got the name, but probably because he lost an eye somehow or another in battle or whatever, okay? Warrior, alpha male, loses the eye, okay? So now he's Cyclops. I'm not sure they called him that to his face, but I think he put it on his coins, okay? So that's his nickname. Lots of nicknames, by the way, of these people. They will have lots of nicknames in this period. All right, so let's continue on with the Fourth Diadoc War. He tries to invade Egypt. He's unsuccessful. Still 307, 301, he turns his attention again to Greece, seeking to completely destroy Cassander. We didn't do it well the first time. We're going to give it another shot. Cassander appeals to Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Seleucus to attack Antigonus. Okay? If you're attacking me, I'm going to get my friends to attack you. Maybe you're going to be diverted. Leave me alone. Lysimachus answers the call. He moves against Antigonus, and then Seleucus arrives to help Lysimachus. So we call these wars, but in reality, they're what? They're civil wars, okay? All of these people are Macedonian. Culturally, they're all Greek. They were all Alexander's generals, and now they're fighting it among themselves, okay? Terrible, terrible, terrible period of history if you're wanting to live a nice, peaceful life. All right, so in 301, there is a battle at a place called Ipsus. It's in Phrygia. Antigonus is killed, Antigonus is killed, and his empire is divided. All right, that ends the Fourth Diadoc War. Here we have another coin. This is the coin this time of Seleucus. On one side, we have the head of Zeus. That's the one that's really clearly visible. On the reverse side, we have Athena with elephants. Okay? Because these guys are using what in their armies? Elephants, okay? Sometimes Asian elephants, sometimes African elephants. Elephants are great because elephants are terrorizing, right? Would you go up against an elephant? Any volunteers, takers? We're not talking about the nice elephants that are in the zoo, or if you go to Scarborough Fair and you get to ride an elephant. That's not the kind of elephants we're talking about. We're talking about war elephants, okay? They may have tusks, hopefully so, because that's pretty impressive. And on top of that elephant, you put a box. And you've got archers and soldiers on top of that box. And so you've got this big crushing machine that's coming at you, plus you got guys up there shooting arrows and throwing spears at you. Who wants to go up against that? No one does, okay? But armies are beginning to use elephants during this period as war animals. They probably at least somewhat picked that up in India when they're out there, because that's where you would find Asian elephants particularly. And then you get the Egyptians as well. Elephants in Africa live in sub-Saharan Africa, so I guess that's where they're getting them. All right, so following events. What follows on all of this? More conflicts are going to follow. See, I'm sparing you all the details. More conflicts are going to follow, but they would not be as large as these four wars. These are the four that are significant. The Jews of Palestine during this period, they're living in an area that's hotly contested by these empires, by the Seleucids particularly, and the Ptolemies down in Egypt. And so they're fighting back and forth, and they're fighting over the territory of Israel. They're not fighting over Israel, they're fighting in Israel and around Israel, and their armies are marching through that. It's going to have a profound effect on their subsequent history and for our purposes in this class. All right, so a couple of maps. We're getting to the end. We're going to finish early today, okay? And this is how we don't fall behind. I finish early, right? Hopefully you have lots of questions. So this is how things kind of look like in 303. I'll turn around, turn my back to you so I can face it, so I can point this out. So you've got the Seleucids out here. You've got the Antigonids here. You've got the Ptolemies down here in Egypt. And you got Cassander and Lysimachus over there, but they're kind of irrelevant to what's going to go on for Israel and for the intertestamental period. But you've got basically these three rather large empires, and Israel, there's Jerusalem on the map, is smack dab in the middle. But in about 303 BC, they're under Antigonus's control. Our next map then kind of shows where all these ended up. These are the Hellenistic empires. You've got the Seleucid Empire over here. Might point out that they get rid of Antigonus in this area. He's forced to go to Greece. So what does that say about Lysimachus and Cassander? They get conquered. Okay? Antigonus has to go that way because Seleucus, or his successors, take all of this territory. And then you got the Ptolemies down here in Egypt, and Israel is right there on the borderland between the two. Okay? So, that is the Diadochi. I see frowns. I see people with headaches. I see people with saying, right now, if I go quickly, I can get to Starbucks. And you're right, it's right up the street. Okay? And have some coffee. Or right now, I'm thinking, I'm going to ask, who's got Tylenol in their purse? Or ibuprofen or something like that. Any questions or comments? Aaron.
How much of the Diadochi Wars are talked about in Daniel? I know in the prophecies that seems to be the reference. Is that your understanding?
That's why we talk about it.
Okay. So it is biblical.
It is biblical, okay? But we're not seeing this morning how it connects. Can I see your book? Do you have your class plan in there? So later in this class, if you look at your class plans, later in this class, we spend 2 classes, January the 1st, January the 5th, on Daniel's prophecies of the period. Okay? The reason we cover this history, thank you. The reason we cover this history is because we have to understand the history of the period to understand what Daniel's prophecies are about. So some of it is from this period, some of it is from other periods, because Daniel covers a panoramic view. Okay? Alexander is in Daniel's prophecies. Persia and Greece are in Daniel's prophecies. We know that, right, from the first 6 chapters. The image, the head of gold, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, right? We're familiar with that, Daniel chapter 2. Look at Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Whew. We never do those in the kids' Bible classes because, boy, they're really hard to understand. And they are really hard to understand. But we're going to spend 2 classes talking about those prophecies. And we will just touch the tip of the iceberg. Actually, what we're going to do is when we cover some of those, I'm actually going to have handouts for y'all, not from me. I mean, they're from me, but I didn't create them, where an individual went through and wrote the Bible verses and described the historical events that are being talked about in a parallel column. And I have no credit for that except I copied it from the guy and used it in the class. I probably modified it some because he really does an excellent job of showing what those prophecies are about. And by the way, the prophecies are so detailed that one reason people have looked at the book of Daniel and said it could not be from 500 BC is because it is that detailed. Daniel couldn't have known all of that. So he must have come from the period 200 BC. Well, we know better, right? Because who reveals to Daniel what's going to happen? God does, okay? But if you don't believe God does those kind of things, you have to date Daniel later because there's no way Daniel could have come up with all of that. He's writing backwards as if it was future. Any other questions? No? Okay.